Gonzalo Lira is a popular YouTuber who was living in Ukraine, and he was doing incredible coverage on the ongoing events surrounding the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. Gonzalo is a Chilean American. He's an American citizen, was living in Ukraine. And again, I've watched many of his videos. He did great videos debunking the fake news coming out of the Western press surrounding Ukraine. And no one has heard from him in, I believe, what is it now? 5 days, 4 days? He's gone missing. And if you know anything about what Ukraine does to journalists who speak out against the official narrative, we have reason to be extremely worried about Gonzalo. So let's get into this. Ukraine Maps tweeted out, "It is now safe to assume that real Gonzalo Lira has either been abducted by the SBU or killed by Nazi paramilitary units in Kharkov city. Several people from inside the city have messaged me, and their iNet works fine," meaning, essentially, Gonzalo Lira should not have any problems to communicating with the West if he's in Kharkov, right? And that is the first thing that gives us a lot of worry. He shouldn't have any problem communicating or getting his message out there, considering other people in Kharkov are not having this issue. Ukraine Map says, "I asked at Chile MFA to look into this matter as he is from Chile." Okay, so I replied to this tweet when I saw it after my stream. I said, "The last I heard from Gonzalo was Thursday, 1:58 a.m. Los Angeles time, around 11:58 a.m. Kharkov time. He was supposed to come on my show this weekend. I've not heard from him, praying that he is all right." And again, the longer this goes on without hearing from him, the more and more worried I get, and the more I get a sick feeling in my stomach. This is a video that Gonzalo put out after the Daily Beast did a hit piece on him. And keep in mind, this is what the Daily Beast does. They do hit pieces on Jimmy Dore, on Joe Rogan. They call him racist, sexist, everything in the book. They just lob their way. And these people are not journalists. They're paid smear artists, right? That's all they do, is they just launch these smear campaigns. So of course Gonzalo is doing this incredible coverage surrounding what's going on in Ukraine. He's debunking the establishment narrative. He's on the ground there, and he's not afraid to call out what's happening. And his content is it was doing very well. It was exploding on the internet. And this is what he had to say, because one of the main things that Gonzalo was covering and talking about was the fact that there are a lot of journalists, a lot of reporters who have gone missing in Ukraine, specifically ones who challenge the official narrative coming out of Ukraine. So listen to this video, Gonzalo Lira, what he has to say surrounding the issue of disappearing journalists in Ukraine. And this is obviously recorded a while ago, but the video has resurfaced given the current events.
So I want you guys to know that if ever you don't hear from me for 12 hours during this conflict, if it's 12 hours or more, assume that I've been picked up by the SBU, and assume that the people most responsible are the Daily Beast. The Daily Beast, who deliberately lied about me, claiming that I'm not in Kharkov, admitted to the fact that people are looking for me and want to get a hold of me in the very hit piece that they wrote, and that they contacted the Ukrainian government to make them aware that I'm in Kharkov, make them aware of my significance, make them aware so they can send some SBU goons to get me. Understand what the Daily Beast has done. And when I said, in the title of this, that the Daily Beast wants to kill me, I'm not being hyperbolic.
Okay, so there you hear it from him. He says the Daily Beast wants to kill me. I'm not being hyperbolic. They're reaching out to the Ukrainian government and these SBU forces to notify them where I am, where I'm located, what I'm doing, right? They want to create some sort of a ramification, for my life, essentially, is what he's saying. He said, if you haven't heard from me in 12 hours, you should know that something is wrong. I've been taken in by SBU or some other, Ukrainian force, and something is wrong. And we haven't heard from him in 3 days now. Almost 4 days now. We haven't heard from him, okay?
Well, we've been covering the Gonzalo Lira story now for the past 24 hours. And Gonzalo Lira is the Chilean journalist who's been living in Ukraine for years, and he's been bravely reporting on what the corrupt Zelensky government has been doing. But we have an update now.
Well, now the Chilean government has confirmed that he is, in fact, missing. The State Department and the representatives from the government of Chile, where he is a citizen, or Chile, has confirmed that he is missing and has been since April 15th. And now there are words that there are, how do we want to say this?
Scott Ritter, who has worked closely with him, who is a U.S. Marine, who has been boots on the ground there and understands what is going on with the Azov Battalion, has a report out, and he stays in close contact with Gonzalo Lira. He has learned through his own troops and supporters in that region that, in fact, Gonzalo Lira has been killed. Here is Scott Ritter's report just a few minutes ago before we went on the air, and I'm going to read it for you. Scott Ritter says, when Belarusian authorities pulled Roman Petreskovich, a blogger who had served a combat tour in the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion before working for Radio Free Europe's Belarus channel out of Prague, off an airplane in May 2021 on charges of inciting a political opposition, roughly the equivalent of sedition, the world went crazy, accusing Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko of trampling on free speech. Protasevich is alive and well, living under house arrest while awaiting trial. When reports emerged that Gonzalo Lira, a Chilean social media influencer who resided in Kharkov, Ukraine, and who published online content critical of the Ukrainian government, was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by the Kraken Unit, which is part of the Azov Battalion, affiliated with the Ukrainian Security Service, the West is totally silent. Free speech isn't a one-way street. To remain silent in the murder of Gonzalo Lira is to be complicit in his death and the deaths of all journalists who pursue the truth, even if it runs counter to the mainstream narrative. Critical thinking should not be a death sentence. Unfortunately for Gonzalo Lira, it seems that it was. So Scott Ritter reporting that Gonzalo Lira has been killed by the Azov Battalion, the Nazi-backed Azov Battalion.
And Scott Ritter was also banned from Twitter. I don't know if he still is, but for reporting truth and getting information out to people from the ground with his sources, he was banned from Twitter.
Yeah, and here he was just last night or 2 nights ago on the Mother of All talk shows on George Galloway's show, talking about the Azov Battalion and this region and why this is so dangerous and his last contact with Gonzalo Lira. Let's listen.
Definitely a city that is firmly in the grip of the Nazis, and anybody who lives in that city, such as Mr. Lira, who is not of that political persuasion, is at risk.
Very, very risky.
So what are the things, let's break down some of the things that he had been saying just to catch you up. So Gonzalo Lira, now there was a hit piece on him from the Daily Beast calling him a sleazy American dating coach and a pro-Putin shill, which, okay, you can decide what you think his brand was by looking through his catalog of things that he had posted on the internet. But when the war broke out, he was somebody who lived in Kharkov and was reporting on what he actually saw, right? When weapons started to be dispersed throughout the city, before Russians had even arrived, he was showing videos of look, these people are just released from prison and being given guns. This is very dangerous. The Russians haven't even shown up yet. He had since been talking about certain names, right, that had names of criminals that were released. He was talking about it. And so it's interesting when you read through this piece, because everyone that this reporter had asked to ring in, the reporter's name is Mark Hay. Okay, what do you think of this guy? It was like this professor who specializes in Ukrainian conflict rang in from New Jersey, right? Or this guy who, from Rutgers, for instance. We talked to this expert on Ukrainian affairs at Rutgers, saying these claims are nonsense. This Ukrainian affairs expert who works at Reed College and has been monitoring the conflict. Well, we're all doing that. from not Ukraine, right?
Right, like in your cushy New York City apartment, Daily Beast, or your Washington D.C. billionaire. By the way, like the Daily Beast is a part of the Western media machine run by billionaires, and so this guy can write a hit piece about a guy who has been living in Ukraine and has been reporting what's unfolding about the Zelensky, the Zelensky buffoonery and thuggery that's been unfolding, and he gets taken down by the Daily Beast.
It's like a YouTube commenter with a bigger platform.
Sure, yes, but
not our commenters.
No, not our commenters, but you know the ones I'm talking about.
Our viewers on Redacted are the best viewers.
Do you still have that tweet that he tweeted out saying that if he ended up missing, because you had that I think on yesterday's show.
Here is a pinned tweet on Gonzalo Lira's page. He pinned this back at the end of March. He said, if you want to learn the truth about Zelensky's regime, Google these names, right? All of these people have gone missing. So he says, if you haven't heard from me in 12 hours or more, put my name on the list. Now, this was March, so he survived at least a few more weeks. One of the last things that he was tweeting about and talking about was Patrick Lancaster's amazing work. We've covered some of Patrick Lancaster's work here on the show for, almost like 2 months now. We've been featuring Patrick Lancaster's boots on the ground, has lived in Ukraine for 8 years, covering the atrocities and the genocide that have been unfolding in the Donbass region that the Western media has ignored, by the way. And by the way, one of the last tweets that Gonzalo Lira actually posted was about the Western media's hypocrisy on these Nazis. And he actually tweeted this. And this compilation of all of these Western headlines talking about the Nazis in Eastern Ukraine, in the military, and leading this regime. And then, of course, a few days later, he's missing, doesn't show up for this interview on the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway, and doesn't show up for his meeting, doesn't show up for the interview. Scott Ritter can't get a hold of him, and they're friends. He's been contacting him and talking with him, can't get a hold of him. And then now we have this confirmation from Scott Ritter that he was, in fact, Gonzalo Lira was murdered by the Kraken Unit, which is part of the Azov Battalion affiliated with the Ukrainian security service.
It's interesting, this Daily Beast piece, because it's asking us to disqualify him based on what he was before the war, which seemed to be some kind of mansplaining type blogger about relationships, right? Mm-hmm. They called him a dating coach, which it's fine. It seemed like there was a lot of machismo in his brand pre-war. So we can, I guess it's worth discussing, right? Do we discount somebody because they were not previously a war expert? But I have heard many guests on various podcasts, policy podcasts and think piece podcasts, of people who also were not experts on war, but happen to have a perspective by living there.
Or should we take get our war advice from people who benefit from war, right? So if you turn on CNN or MSNBC or any of these other channels, they've got former CIA contractor, former CEO of Lockheed Martin, whatever, this general who all benefit now from war.
Right.
So where do you get your perspective? Or what about Lisa Ling? Remember Lisa Ling? I don't know how many of you remember Channel 1. Did you raise your hand if in the 1990s you had Channel 1 in your schools, in your junior high schools or your high schools? Yeah. It was the TVs that were up in the corner that Channel 1 installed, and then you had to watch that 8-minute newscast every morning. Wasn't Anderson Cooper also a Channel 1er? I believe he was. Well, Lisa Ling was on Channel 1, and she was talking about kind of pop culture and stuff like that. And then you know what? She goes in, basically like sneaks into North Korea to report on the atrocities and the humanitarian crisis in North Korea as a journalist. So are you allowed to evolve as a human being? But it doesn't matter. What he was reporting is the truth. That should kind of cancel out any dating advice he gave years ago on a blog. Sure. Who gives a rat's ass?
Well,
he's there actually covering the story.
I saw, I can't remember the lady that said it that I saw in a piece, but she's basically saying back in the day, journalists were not paid huge sums of money. They were actually in the trenches, and they made just a regular wage, so they would push against the elite. But now you have people like Rachel Maddow making $30,000 a day to do the news. How can she be connected with people at all? You know what I mean? So anytime there's an agenda, she's not going to walk away from that $30,000 a day. She's going to push that agenda at the end of the day. So it's like the media has become the elite. So all of them, they're working with the war contractors and all the people with the money. And so there's nobody really pushing against the establishment anymore.
Well, it does seem like, especially this piece we're discussing about Gonzalo Lira from the Daily Beast, has unveiled jealousy. Like, this guy is in Ukraine, has all of a sudden 45,000 followers on Telegram and 20,000 followers on Twitch or whatever. And he's telling you things that we are telling you the opposite. So we have to then tell you why he's bullshit, right?
Right.
I mean, it's so interesting. Like, should we see, Mark, hey, were you like, I don't know, what have you been up to your whole life that could disqualify you to, you know?
Yeah, let's look into Mark Hay, the reporter for the Daily Beast.
Like maybe he, you know, lost a gymnastics meet when he was a kid. I have no idea who he is.
Well, and the way that article, just the title is worded, that's a guy that probably would celebrate his death.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, like, to put a bow on this, sadly, is that the reports that we have, and we have confirmation from the Chilean government that he has gone missing.
Right.
And we have a report from Scott Ritter, who says that that Gonzalo Lira has been killed by the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. That is the latest. I mean, that is breaking news. That is the update that we have here. Now, we don't have independent confirmation of that. The Chilean government hasn't confirmed this yet, so we're waiting on that, but we wanted to bring this to you. So at the end of the day, regardless of what dating advice the guy did before, he is now, according to Scott Ritter, has been killed in Ukraine by covering the truth about what's been unfolding in that.
Yes, and I think that this is a good lesson for all of us to, like, okay, we're calling him how a sleazy American dating coach, right? And you can label that, like I was going with that example, like, what if Mark Hay had, you know, lost a gymnast meet when he was like 12, right? We could say failed gymnast, blah, blah, blah. Or like when I was 5, was in a local beauty pageant, but have never done anything since, right? You could call me failed pageant queen. Actually, I won that one. Former pageant queen or whatever, right? Like, this is incredibly leading at this point. And so it's for us to say, like, I'm going to read into it. And who quoted here is actually in Ukraine? Only Gonzalo Lira, who did not participate in this. So I think it's for us to be prudent consumers of news and sort of.
Well, it's also like it really like rings of sort of like I don't have any like proof on this, but it rings of like CIA propaganda, where because this guy is talking about Nazis in Ukraine. So to discredit him, you can't just be like, well, no, they're not, because the best way to discredit him is be like, yeah, but look, this guy is also bad. And then, boom, you know, then it's like it's smear campaign, basically.
Yes.
Well, Vanessa Beeley tweeted this earlier. Independent journalist Gonzalo Lira is allegedly captured by the NATO-backed Azov Nazis, doxxed by the Daily Beast, and linked so-called journalist FBI informant Sarah Ashto Cirillo, while journalists are forbidden entry to Assange extradition hearing. Get the picture? I mean, it kind of hits at the heart of like the hypocrisy.
These things do not
right?
feel unrelated. Absolutely.
So we'll continue to watch this Gonzalo Lira story. It's heartbreaking. Again, a number of journalists now who've been reporting on the atrocities by the Azov Battalion and the sort of barbarism from the Zelensky side of things. Again, Putin is no hero. Putin poisons his own people. Putin is a horrible human being by all accounts, right? As we've documented here on the show. But the only bit of news that you're getting from the West is that Putin bad, Zelensky great. It's black and white. Don't ask any questions. Just fall in line and let us funnel billions of dollars into this war zone. That's what you get when you watch the mainstream media. And hopefully you know enough that it's not